Hi, Doug Sr. here for your Live Clean tip of the day. Well, it's a new year, and it's a chance for many of us to change things up and focus in on our health. And you know, we're convinced, like many experts, that good health originates in the gut. That's right. It's all about healthy bacterial balance. And as far as we're concerned, we could go on all day literally talking about which foods to eat to maintain a healthy gut microbiome. However, right now, let's focus instead on those foods to keep out of our diets, because it's these foods that play a stealthy role in what leads us to gut bacterial imbalances and overall chronic poor health conditions. So with that, let's get started. The first pro-inflammatory food we want to stay away from are grains. Things like wheat, barley, rye, oats, and even other grasses. So why are these on the keep away list? Well, many of them contain gluten, which is a protein linked to a number of gut-related issues like IBS, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, leaky gut, and of course, celiac disease. Many experts, in fact, have linked gluten as the lead culprit in autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, Graves' disease, lupus, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Sjogren's syndrome, and even others. So why is gluten such a troublemaker? Well, consider this. Gluten can trigger inflammation by irritating the gut cell lining. Inflammation is the body's way of protecting itself by trying to defend against foreign invaders. In an inflammatory response, damaged cells release chemicals, like histamine, for example, to isolate foreign invaders like gluten as an example, and then call in things like white blood cells to attack and eradicate the invaders. So view gluten as a foreign invader, and know that a constant diet of gluten-containing foods can keep the inflammatory response chronic within the body. So gluten can also alter the microbiome. That's the diverse collection of trillions of bacteria in the gut. In fact, for some very sensitive people, gluten can alter this bacterial balance within minutes after being digested. This change in bacterial balance is known as dysbiosis. So a dysbiotic gut can lead to our next problem with gluten, which is it can trigger something known as intestinal permeability or leaky gut. Leaky gut's where the one cell thick intestinal lining becomes compromised and begins allowing foreign invaders like gluten or other toxins into the bloodstream, kicking in another inflammatory response, and it gets our immune system to be overactive once again. Then, to make matters worse, gluten also has something known as molecular mimicry. Okay, so this is kind of cool, not from a health perspective, but just imagining that what I'm about to say can really happen. So here's the scoop. Many experts now connect chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases to this molecular mimicry. So what exactly is that? Well, many foreign substances like gluten have molecular structures very close, not exactly the same, but very close to our body's own tissues. So what happens when this foreign invader, in this case gluten, gets into our bloodstream because of leaky gut? Well, our immune system gets alerted and creates antibodies to fight off this foreign invader. But in the process, because of molecular mimicry, our immune system not only attacks the invader, gluten in this case, but it also mistakenly identifies tissues with similar structures as gluten and begins to attack them as well. So as an example, thyroid tissue is famous for being close to gluten in structure. The joints are another area often attacked because of gluten in our bloodstream. Other gluten mimic cells exist in the brain and nervous system as well. So think of it like this. A continual diet of gluten can bring about a chronic or continual inflammatory response within our bodies, which can then lead to autoimmune diseases like arthritis. So think of the joints. Or hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's disease, think of thyroid tissue or TSH receptors or thyroglobulin or the enzyme TPO thyroid peroxidase. Then there's multiple sclerosis, so think the nervous system. And even Alzheimer's disease, think the brain, of course. So when we think of gluten, we have to think of wheat, rye, barley, and other grains. And sadly, there are many pseudograins or grasses that we may think don't contain gluten, but they contain other proteins that have been found to be just as pro-inflammatory as gluten. And really, there's no middle ground for many of us, whether it's gluten or these other pro-inflammatory proteins. In fact, some experts have said one exposure to gluten the size of a crumb can lead to up to 2 months of a continuous autoimmune attack. So what can you do? Well, consider alternative meal options that don't include grains and other gluten-containing foods. And by the way, in case you were curious, most processed foods contain gluten. And then of course there are the obvious ones like breads, pastas, cereals, and even flour-containing foods. Now, if you want to know whether you have a sensitivity to gluten, try going off gluten-containing foods for up to 30 days. Then, day 31, reintroduce gluten into your system and look for symptoms. Chances are, for many of us, they'll show up. We all can exhibit differently with gluten-related symptoms, but many common reactions can be things like stomach discomfort, bloating, gas, headaches, fogginess, runny nose, sinus congestion, sluggishness, sleepiness, even diarrhea and constipation, rash, and get depression, and there are many others. These just happen to be some of the top symptoms. So a good start to good health is to consider changing up your diet to totally remove gluten-containing foods. For many, those common symptoms thought to be normal may just disappear in quick order. So in our next talk, we're going to cover the second pro-inflammatory food to consider removing from your diet. So stay tuned. I'm Doug Sr., and this has been your Live Clean Tip of the Day.